The Final Fight series is an interesting series on how it was created and how it came to be included into the Street Fighter shared universe. And even though everyone is crazy over Cody as the lead character, he is not the main character as Mike Haggar holds that title. So, let's break down this timeline and get into it. So, to give you all a length of this timeline, I put it between the years of 1983 to 2048. Yes, I said 2048 and you will see why. The first game in the timeline, Saturday Night Slam Masters. When looking at Mike Haggar's Japanese Saturday Night Slam Masters profile, it states that he is 40 years old, continuing his professional wrestling career. Combining that with his Final Fight profile, which gives his birth date of September 3rd, 1943, this game takes place in 1983. This game focuses on the original champion, Victor Ortega, disappearing and leaving the championship belt up for grabs. The 8 best wrestlers worldwide enter this wrestling tour tournament to be crowned the new champion. Since wrestlers typically have 3 seasons in a year, they wrestle year-round. To understand the CPWA, we will use real-world professional wrestling events as a template. A well-known international wrestling event was WCW/New Japan Super Show, which occurs in March the first year, then in January the following 2 years. Since this game and the sequel have different names, it's safe to assume that they are different events, and so, that would mean these games are not back-to-back. The next big event was Collision in Korea, held in 1996, 3 years later. Haggar must have just turned 40 years old in game, so we can place this game between September to December, where the WCW Super Shows has occurred. I would place this event in September to match up with other events coinciding with the next game in the series. Ring of Destruction, Slam Masters 2. Like I stated before, this sequel must take place a few years after the first game, and the plot of the game supports that slightly. The plot states, the wrestlers of the Capcom Wrestling Association gather once again, but this time the Blood Wrestling Association has joined in to wrestle with the CWA for the championship. Victor Ortega, the previous Muscle Bomber champion, as well as owner of the CWA, had left because he couldn't find anyone strong enough to give him a decent challenge. Now he's back and is the guy to beat to earn the championship. I would place this game happening 1986. Since Haggar retired from wrestling to become mayor of Metro City, then this game would happen in September, right before the mayor elections. Since Metro City is a fictional version of New York City, we can use their timetable for this. The mayor of New York City is elected in early November every 4 years, and the year immediately following a United States presidential election year, and takes office at the beginning of the following year. This fact would mean that following his win in Ring of Destruction, he retired and won the elections in 1986, 3 years after the first game. This means he started his office in January of 1987 with the promise to clean up Metro City. Final Fight. The game booklet states that Haggar spent 5 years on his wrestling circuit before retiring to become mayor. That time would add up, since he trained Biff and Gunlock before they joined the Capcom Professional Wrestling Association. Since the plot states that Haggar's daughter was abducted, it must have occurred not too long after Haggar's clean up Metro City promise. So, a few months later would make sense, placing the time of this game around May or June. I would say the settings of the game seem like it is summertime, which would place it in June, after Cody's birthday, who is 20 years old in the game. This would place the events of this game in 1987. I see these events happening in no longer than a week, most likely a few days. So, it would still be June once Jessica was saved. At the end of the game, Cody leaves the city to travel. Final Fight 2. The time that is brought to us in the game manuals doesn't match the ending of the first game and how the events merge into the Street Fighter series, meaning that the time is retconned. The manual says that Cody and Jessica are on vacation, but we know that the two have broken up and she is studying in Europe. We also know that Cody left the city at the end of the first game. It is also stated that Guy was training during this period of time away from Metro City, which is backed up by his appearance in Street Fighter Alpha 2. All this is also backed up by the replacement of Cody and Guy with Carlos and Maki in them, Carlos and Maki not appearing in Street Fighter Alpha 2 with Guy. So that several years states can be seen as several months, placing the game sometime in late 1987, around the time of Street Fighter Alpha 2's start. Final Fight Revenge. The plot of this game states that Cody returns after a year of traveling and learns that the Mad Gear is reforming and Jessica has been abducted again. In the All About Street Fighter 03 page 65, it states that Hager told Guy he was found on site during one of the drug investigations. No relation to the deals, of course, but around him were 4 people that needed to be taken to the hospital, so he had to be arrested. This matches up with the in-game story that Cody was arrested by Eddie E for crimes that were committed by Mad Gear member Poison and the many street fights that Cody had participated in from his time. This would place the game's events in summer of 1988 and his arrest as well, since in Alpha 3 he appears in a prison outfit. Final Fight 3. The game manual states that Guy returned to Metro City after completing several months of training, which matches up with Guy's ending in Street Fighter Alpha 2. This also explains his appearance in Final Fight Revenge. He joins Hager, Lucia, and Dean to put a stop to the Skull Cross gang. In the All About Street Fighter 03 book page 65, it states that, "A City of Peace." Such was the title it earned just a year before. Yet, the city had now lost its color, as if it had sunk in a gray mist. Nonetheless, Guy was walking towards the city hall. Reason being, he had a meeting with the mayor, Hager. He was an old-time friend, as the two used to fight side by side. After announcing his arrival at the desk, Guy was directed to an office. This helps show that the events of Final Fight 3 happened in late 1988/early 1989, as it occurs before Street Fighter Alpha 3. I would place it in early 1989, supporting another statement from the same book saying, "And so Hager talked about the organization that had crept into the city half a year before." According to him, many politicians were already at their bidding, and Hager only had 2 years left as a mayor. Like I stated earlier, mayors are elected every 4 years, making all the events from Final Fight to Final Fight 3 occur in 2 years max. Final Fight, Streetwise. Where Final Fight Revenge's canon is sketchy but works, Final Fight, Streetwise has officially been stated to be non-canon but a sequel to the original Final Fight, but I'd like to argue that it fits in the timeline just as well as Final Fight Revenge. For this game, we know that Hager is no longer the mayor, but it never states who is the new mayor. This means that the game must take place at least 2 years after Street Fighter Alpha 3/Final Fight 3. By the look of Hager, I would argue that it may take place at least 3 to 4 years after Final Fight 3, seeing that Hager has established a gym to train young fighters, and since many of the residents have forgotten about him. That last part one find hard to believe though. The 3 years would place the events of this game 1 year after Street Fighter 4, but 2 years before Street Fighter 5, taking in the account of Ken Masters' son, Mel Masters, being born at the end of Super Street Fighter 4 and being 3 years old in Street Fighter 5. The timing for this is perfect also because the new mayor takes position the following year, meaning that Cody being mayor in Street Fighter 5 makes sense. With all that said, I would place this game happening in mid to late 1993, the 4 years after Final Fight 3. Captain Commando. Captain Commando's canon has been questioned because of how he was presented as a game, and Yuta Hamura's profile on the Shadaloo Combat Research Institute states he can clear a game of Captain Commando with Mac the Knife in a single credit on the arcade. Although this does raise questions, I wouldn't take it too serious, and I would believe the facts in the game itself, such as being set in Metro City's future and Ginzu being mentioned to have been trained in Bushinryu. It is also mentioned that Ginzu's father, Go, is the 40th Grandmaster. This would make him Guy's student and successor. This would place Guy taking on students around the time of Street Fighter 5, which would explain why Ziku is in the game and not Guy. This game takes place in 2026, which is about 30 years after Street Fighter V/Street Fighter III Second Impact. Go would have taken the title Grandmaster around 2006, which means Ginzu was born around that time to be a successor of Bushinryu in 2026. Maybe Kimberly is his master, but we won't know about her involvement with Guy and anyone else until Street Fighter VI and any future title of Street Fighter comes out. And just to throw this out there, maybe Star Electronics, Street Fighter's version of Stark Industries, made the early versions of equipment for the Striders. Strider, 2014. Originally, this series wouldn't have been connected to the Street Fighter shared universe, but after Street Fighter V, the evidence is there. The game in question is the new Strider game that came out in 2014, which is set in the year of Mayo 0048. I see this being the year 2048, like in the original series. Since Ziku is hint to have started the Striders and his transformation into his younger self is in-game visual evidence of that. It's safe to say that by the time this game would have happened, Ziku would be an old man the age of around 95. This is the age that the original director from the older Strider games looks to be. That is plenty of time to fill his new style with warriors and establish them into the world. The last thing I would bring into question is Hiryu's inclusion into Capcom Fighting All-Stars, a game that had primarily Street Fighter shared universe characters in. To be included into that type of a game would surely mean that the series has some type of connection to the Street Fighter shared universe. With all that being said, this game would be the end of the timeline. So, the timeline goes as follows. 1983, the events of Saturday Night Slam Masters happen. 1986, the events of Ring of Destruction, Slam Masters 2 occur. 1987, the events of Final Fight happen. 1987, the events of Final Fight 2 occur. 1988, the events of Final Fight Revenge happen. 1989, the events of Final Fight 3 occur. 2026, the events of Captain Commando occur. 2048, the events of Strider, 2014, ends the timeline. The Final Fight timeline was interesting to research and decipher. Since Mike Hager is the true main character, I connected the Slam Masters series Tot High timeline. Also, since Bushinryu and Metro City are the connections to the future games, Captain Commando and Strider 2014 are placed in this direct timeline. With all that said, this has been way easier than deciphering the Street Fighter games timeline. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Warriors.